Hey guys, this is Buford with Scholarships for Soccer, and today we have a great guest. His name is Greg McGreevey, and in addition to coaching U13 girls, U15 boys, and U19 boys, he also runs a soccer club. He's a busy man. So, Greg, we really appreciate you taking a few moments to talk with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Let's start with the U13 girls. I believe that's their first year full field, if I'm not correct.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. What kind of skills do you expect them to have when they come to you before they get to you?
It's a good question, right? It depends on the group that you're coaching. Are you going to coach a top competitive team? Or are you coaching kind of a classic select team? Um, by that age, if it's been done right, they should have technical skills with the ball. They should be competent with 1v1s, 2v2s. They should have what I would call individual technical ability and some level of proficiency with quote unquote individual tactics. What do I do when I have a defender pressing me and I have the ball, right? Unfortunately, that's not usually what we get. So very frequently we'll have athletes, we'll have some technical players, but you have a lot of kids that just are not near the proficiency that they need to be to be in a place where you can start teaching them the tactics you need to when they go to 22 people on the field.
Okay. Do you think that's a problem, in general? I'm not saying just at your club, but in general with, U.S. soccer's curriculum or lack thereof is the why, kids are coming to full field and not technically proficient?
Yeah, 100%. Right. I think it's a lack of attention maybe on that. More, I mean, I don't know that that's fair. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that America's still not a soccer country in a lot of ways, and so you don't have families playing at the park, right? Yeah, let's go play basketball. Let's do this. Let's whatever. We have a lot of things we can do, and so it's not. I'm playing at the park every day with my older brothers, and I get really good with the ball, right? So we're a little behind in that, but then we get to not investing the energy or the development into the coaching at the recreational level, which is where every single player is going to start,
Yeah.
right? U5, U6, U7, U8, recreational soccer. And even the way I started is like, hey, we don't have a coach for this team. Do you want to get in on it? Like, oh, I don't know anything about it, but sure, my kid's involved. And so we bring in inexperienced coaches, they just don't know. And then the last piece of that is because all these kids grow up in what's functionally a recreational environment. You go from season to season, and do we win games? Are we having fun? But there's not an idea of the longitudinal development. There's not a understanding by a lot of those coaches, and certainly from a lot of parents who may not have a viewpoint on it too, of this is a years and years and years process to make a soccer player.
Yeah.
And so I can't teach them, all of the defensive things they need to know when they're 8, because I really can't waste time on that when I need to get them comfortable with the ball, right? So there's a whole bunch of facets to it, but it's really about understanding that, as your son and mine are both 04s and, juniors and seniors in high school, and it's taken them years to get to the place that they are.
Yeah.
And it's a layering and a layering and a layering, and you have to do it in the right order. Otherwise, there's so many kids that want to play high school ball. They don't have the technical ability, and they're never going to make it.
Okay. Also, with that first year of full field, I noticed when I watch U13 kids, especially early in the season, is half of them are dragging in the first half because they're not used to
Sure.
playing on the full field.
Yeah.
So, how do you deal with that as a coach?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's the fitness question, right? I think a bigger question when we take functionally 11 and 12-year-olds onto a full pitch, they're not capable of playing the ball from side to side. like you would expect at the high school age, right? Like high school team, my U19s can make the ball switch from one side of the field all the way across to the other, and it's an appropriate size for them. So most of the time the team will play like in a third of the width because they're like, oh, we're going to squeeze together. I can only make that big of a pass, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's okay. I think that's part of the growth process, and starting to understand the bigger space. A lot of times at least for me, my philosophy has been, fitness comes in the game. And so I'm not going to say, take a U13 team and say, we need to do a bunch of running, right? We're still in the phase of developing them technically. We have to spend time on the ball. If you have half of your training that doesn't have a ball, your coach is doing it the wrong way. And it still at that age should be relatively small sided, right? And so what we do in training is we take those small sided experiences and then we'll translate that as we'll kind of composite them together on the full sided field. And it takes a couple years, frankly, to get there. And by the time they're U15, they're kind of in the groove, right? And so, a lot of times what I'll do is just tactically work with the team. Like, we don't need to, if you're a wing if you're an 11 and you're on the left side and you're all the way out on the sideline and the ball's all the way on the other side of the field, that doesn't do us any good because you're never going to get the ball, right? So we'll compact that shape a little bit, because what I really want them to start to understand is just the interaction between the players with that many people on the field and the angles and the ideas of space. And then the scale of the space comes a little bit later.
Got you. Okay. Last question for the U13 girls. Having a daughter myself, I know that's a tough age for girls off the pitch.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, fortunately, I coach competitive level, and so most of the girls are there ready to go. I think the biggest thing to do is, for girls especially, and much different than the boys, the girls need a safe place. They're going to thrive and grow in a safe soccer environment. And you can see that if they're not feeling comfortable, they're not going to absorb anything you say. They're not going to learn anything that day. It's going to be all distractions, right? Very much about that safe social interaction. And so if you can create that for the girls, in some ways you can insulate some of the stuff that happens off the field, because you've created a place where they can come and be themselves and feel good, and you create a good culture. But it's extremely critical, where I think a lot of times the boys, you can push them a lot harder. Not you can't push girls, but the environment can be a little different just because of how they approach competitiveness. And the girls want to get after it, but they want to make sure that relationship with their coach and with their teammates is a healthy one, and that's really a priority, I think.
Okay. All right. Now, going to the U15, you got U15 boys, and
Yeah.
that presents another problem. There's 14 starting. The hormones are kicking in a couple of years later for the boys, and
But yeah,
start to get after a little bit on the field. So how do you ever have to rein in U15 boys? Or?
Oh, I mean, yes, right? Like every day. I think it's more of them. Can you get them to not just stare at you with a blank stare and like kind of drool a little bit? Like, did you understand what I said? And they're like, no, the interesting thing about that age is that it's such a big gap in terms of where kids are growing.
Yeah.
So we have I coach a group that really is functionally two teams. And so we have a kind of an A team and a B team. And some of our best technical, smartest soccer players are on that second group because they're 5'2", right? They're just tiny and they weigh 85 pounds, carrying a big bucket of water. Like, they're just teeny little things. And so managing these kids as they're in their different growth phases is, I think, really critical in that middle years, right? And not leaving a very, very good soccer player behind because he's going to be a late developer. So if the club is doing their job right, they are communicating the reasons to keep kids in certain training environments where they can have the best chance for success, right? And where they can develop as their individual player. It doesn't always mean the quote unquote top team, because athleticism plays a big role in sports. And so you're going to have early developers that always make the top groups early on. But if we don't do a good job then of making sure we're teaching them to be players, if we rely on that athleticism as coaches, the rest of the world's going to pass us by, or the rest of our soccer community is going to pass us by, because we're not teaching the players to play, right? So there's just really interesting dynamic in that age group in the middle, where you're managing just flat out when and how they're growing.
Yeah. All right. Now, as you get into the U15 stages, and you're going to tournaments, and I guess beginning to start thinking about college showcases and everything, the intensity amps up for the players, but it also amps up for the parents. So
Yep.
How do you deal with that intensity from the parent side?
It's a great question. I actually, in my experience, have found the younger the player, the crazier the sideline in some ways. Yeah, it's not to say at the very top level, it's not get a little bit intense, right? But a lot of times, so what I've done is from early on, either in the process with a team that I've had for a couple of years or any year, I'm just setting clear expectations. And so the coach, as a parent, the coach should be communicating clear expectations to you. It should set a clear culture for what the team wants to be. And that should include how our sideline behaves. So my parents know that I'm going to call them out if they're doing stuff that is not appropriate, because frankly, it doesn't help the players. It has nothing to do with making their player a better player if you tell them to put the wheels on. Like, the kids out there running, right? Like, let the coach deal with whether or not they're running as hard as they think that they should be. So there's a lot of those things that I think it's like, yeah, I'm so energized and I'm bought into what my kid's doing, but it's not helpful. And so I think we've got a long ways to go with that, just collectively, because I sometimes am on the parent sideline. And I'm like, oh, and my wife's like, you have to tell everybody to keep quiet, so you better not say anything, So it's a challenge. It's not something that I look at and go, parents are bad. Parents are partners in this journey that we're on for their kids, right? And it's their child, and they know them the best.
Yeah.
And so we really need to be in partnership with each other, and we need to be doing that to set the right culture for the team, so that each of those players can become what they want to be.
Okay, so let's get up to U19, which I don't know if will your son play the U19 next year?
This year we've got an 04, 03 group, and so we'll kind of be there 2 years in a row, because he's an 04.
That's how our club does it.
Yeah.
But you're getting into that, kids going into their junior, senior years, recruiting's hot and heavy.
Yep.
Well, hopefully recruiting's hot and heavy.
Sure.
Been kind of crazy last year with COVID, but it's opening up. How do you, as a coach, deal with college coaches, coming looking at your players? Let's say you got a kid that's really good, but he may have an attitude issue. Do you discuss that with the college coach, or are you trying to put your player in the best light? I mean,
it's a good question, right? So
I'm not saying any coach tries to lie for the kid, but you don't have to disclose everything. But I mean,
yeah,
I just always wonder how you handle that as a coach.
How do you manage that? So it's a good question, and sometimes as a coach, there are times where maybe you're not even in the loop, like they're having conversation with colleges, and it's not been, you might have been privy to that, right? And so normally what I'll do, and what I've done with these boys as we've kind of grown up together, is we're trying to understand their individual goals, right? And so I am helping kind of guide them into, okay, as you're looking at these colleges, what are you looking for? What's realistic? What do you want to accomplish? The reality is I've sent players from my team to teams at a higher level, because no matter what we want to say, there's always a team at a higher level. Unless you're the Barcelona Academy, maybe, but there's always somebody else. So I've done that because our team is not at a level where we're going to create a Division 1 athlete. Now, can we do Division 2? Can we have an NAIA? Can we have Division 3 athlete level? Absolutely. And I've got kids interested in pursuing that. And that's kind of, I guess, overarching where our club lives, is in that realm. But that serves, 99% of the players out there. So when I talk with coaches, I'll be proactive with the kid when it's appropriate, and help them do their reach out if I can. If coach contacts me, I'm going to be honest to the point of, here's the things I see with this player, but here's why I see this higher level potential in them. And I think that coaches are going to appreciate that. I mean, the biggest thing as a club coach that I need to protect is my credibility when the next phone call happens. Because if I'm not credible to a college coach, then they're never going to call me again and get input, right? And so, or look for a player that I send them, because to be like, yeah, that guy told me one thing and it's not the truth. So I think you have to have some transparency in that, and the coach hopefully knows the player well enough to be able to manage that in a way that's productive.
Okay, and at this level, you kind of mentioned your club, lives at the, where you send players D2, D3 level. How do you handle that parent who thinks that their kid is, the kid that's gonna go, is gonna go to a top 25 program and start as a freshman, when
Right.
when you know that,
That happens a
they're a
lot.
good player, but
Yeah.
they should be at maybe a mid top level D2 program.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't control what the family or the player or the parent wants to do. I can give them my opinion, and I can give them the resources I think that are appropriate. But like I've said, I've had those conversations with players, and then just said, you know what, I understand where you're at, and I know the level of player you're at, and let me help you try that, right? And so then I'll reach out to another club coach I know that has that level of team and go, hey, give this kid a look. Sometimes it works out, sometimes they come back. But I don't want to be the player or the coach that's held a player back because he's the best player on my team or one of. My job is not to make a winning team. That's a professional coach's job, right? It's in our area, it's the Portland Timbers. They have to worry about that. My job is to make sure that each of the players I have accomplish the things they want to do on and off the field, right? And I use the time with them in a productive way to help them do that. So, but yeah, so I'm happy to say, if you don't think this is the right environment, let me help you find the place that you like. A lot of times they're back, but a lot of times it works out, and so I think just the hardest thing as a coach, because we're all competitive, is setting that ego part aside and really understanding what my job is like and how I can do it better for my players.
Okay, and final question. What is your favorite part of coaching? I mean, why you coach 3 teams and run a club?
I have no idea. That's crazy. Don't do it. Anybody who's thinking of that, step away now. No. I mean, I obviously got involved in it because my kids have been involved. So there's always that piece of being involved with the sport, either because you love it and your kids come, or they've loved it and you've come to it, right? And so that's great because it's this common language we can speak at the house, and this common interests that we have, which I think is important. But more so for me is the moments of influence that kids have come back and said, hey, you may not have known it, but when you said this to me, it meant something really important. And even just with the high school seniors, like I've had those times where they felt like they could come talk to me about that. And there's nothing better than that, right? There's nothing better than knowing like I did something important for that kid in the time that he needed it, and I was there for him. And not a single time has anybody come back and say, "Hey, coach, remember when we won that game?"
Yeah.
Not a single time. There's never a player that goes back to their coach really and says, maybe you win a state championship. Okay, so that's important, but very rarely, right? And it's more like, remember when you said this to me? This is what it meant. Like when I got to college, I remembered what you said, and this is how it helped me. And that's the best part, hands down. It's like, it's cool.
All right. Well, Greg, I know you're busy, and I appreciate you taking time to talk with us. And I'm sure the parents in the group will get a lot out of this little discussion. And hope you come back real soon.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to, and hopefully, some of the things I say make sense, and people can get something from it. But I really appreciate what you do to kind of help grow the game, for all of us across the country. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. And we'll talk soon.